Welcome, critters. I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine Critical Role episodes, plot lines, characters, players, and everything in between through the lens of sacred reading practices. So this particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 12, Part 1. And joining me today is Alyssa again. Nice to have you back.
Hi.
And the icebreaker. And the icebreaker for today is, if you could be any supernatural creature, what would you be and why?
Oh, I think that the first one that comes to mind is a Kelpie. I really like Kelpies. They're fun.
Yeah.
And they have that kind of, they're recognizable, and most people know what you mean when you say Kelpie, but also they're really easy to just hide away in the middle of nowhere. It's great.
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind for me was a Displacer Beast. Because I like the whole big cat vibe, but I also like the whole like magical eye stalks vibe.
Best of both worlds, I guess.
Yeah, I was like, well, how about both?
When in doubt, all of the above.
Yes. So my question though is, what's the difference between a Kelpie and a Selkie?
So a Kelpie is a horse, a water horse.
Okay.
And a Selkie is a seal-skinned creature that can turn into a woman.
Okay. Yeah. Because there's so many different canons out there too to choose from.
Right.
Like one thing in one canon isn't necessarily the same thing in another canon.
That's fair. And there's so many different mythologies that you kind of got to be specific about which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah.
Like, because I almost said dragon, but I feel like that's so overdone. And it really depends on what world you're in, like whether there's pit beings or just kind of like mindless rage animals.
Yeah, dragon can go a lot of different ways depending on what part of the world you're in. And yeah, it's also a kind of a cop-out answer in a lot of ways because everybody wants to be a dragon.
Yeah. Like I think I'd be down for being like Raishan, but like without the disease.
Yeah.
Because she's like super intelligent, got the whole like physical strength package, but also the mental magical ability package as well.
Right. I actually really like her. I just wouldn't want to fight her, but she's a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right, well, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection as we deepen on our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. So as always, we love hearing your own insights and stories as well. So please comment, like, and subscribe. Ready? All right, let's dive in. So, Vox Machina, they have just defeated a beholder named Kavarn, who was wielding the Horn of Orcus, a powerful and evil artifact, just after finishing the fight at the top of the temple in a city full of mind flayers in the Underdark. They frantically discuss what to do with their ally Kima, who has turned to stone during the fight. Keyleth asks if they can discuss what to do with the horn prior to unstoning Kima. I made it a verb. I don't know if that's a verb or not. Which Tiberius agrees with and asks if it's possible to partially restore Kima to hold her in a half stone, half flesh state, which isn't even possible. They ask Clarota what to do, and he says to wait until he can speak with his fellow mind flayers. That's when Scanlan jumps in and asks Tiberius if he is actually with them as a group because he was absent for the majority of the fight. Thank you, Scanlan. Tiberius says, on the contrary, without me, you would still be fighting the damn thing. And then uses his silence spell to stop Scanlan from saying anything more. And Scanlan tries to dispel magic, but then Tiberius counterspells the dispel. So So Tiberius continues talking about how they must not let Kima get a hold of the horn because she said that she wants to take it back to Amon before he finally ends the silent spell on Scanlan. That's when they notice that there are 3 mind flayers and 2 mind flayers and 2 additional intellect devourers enter the room where they are. They move toward the elder brain and Clarota engages them telepathically to speak to them. Clarota then turns around to look at the rest of the group as one of the other mind flayers pulls the mind shielding cap from his head. Grog, Tiberius, Pike, Keyleth, and Scanlan are then asked to make intelligence saving throws as they get mind blasted by the group of mind flayers, including Clarota, the turncoat of the party. And that's when they roll for initiative. So as they notice that the other creatures are starting to approach the doorways into the room, Vex starts shooting a hail of thorns into the elder brain to catch all the mind flayers in the radius. Keyleth, still in earth elemental form, moves through the stone floor to start breaking down the entrances to the room to block them off from the other creatures. She makes her slam attack and brings down one door, but not entirely. There's a pile of rubble with a gap at the top. Tiberius attempts to crush the horn with telekinesis unsuccessfully, then starts running towards the magic carpet. Percy shoots at the elder brain. Clarota wraps his tentacles around Scanlan's head and grapples him, who is still stunned from the mind blasts previously. Pike is still stunned as well, and then Vax runs over to the elder brain to stab it a bit. One of the mind flayers wraps its tentacles around Pike's head, while another tries to attack Tiberius unsuccessfully. One intellect devourer attacks Vax unsuccessfully, while the other tries to attack Vax again, also unsuccessful. Scanlan rolls a natural 20 on his saving throw against the stun effect, but does not succeed in shaking the mind flayer's grapple. Grog rolls a 1 and is unable to break from the grapple of one of the cage monsters that he is still held in from the last episode, but he is still able to throw his axe of returning toward Clarota that is holding onto Scanlan. Vex casts Hunter's Mark on Clarota and shoots 2 arrows at him. Earth Elemental Keyleth moves over to the Elder Brain to break the container that is holding it, successfully punching a massive hole, pretty much breaking half of it. Tiberius drops the horn onto the magic carpet with Percy, then seals up the doors with 2 obelisks of stone and uses the last one to push himself up into the air. He also uses some sorcery points to cast Blur on himself. Percy takes a shot at Clarota, successfully killing him off, and then takes another shot at the mind flayer holding Pike. Pike fails again in saving herself from the mind blast stun, so Vax runs over and steals Clarota's hat, then stabs the mind flayer attacking Pike, successfully killing it off as well. The last 2 remaining, so there were 3 who joined Clarota, they teleport out of there for self-preservation, but one of the intellect devourers does attack Keyleth unsuccessfully while the other attacks Percy successfully. Scanlan grabs Pike and says, "I want to have babies with you," and Dimension doors them up to the top of the temple where Vex and Trinket are. He also throws some inspiration to Grog on his way up, who is then finally successful in breaking the grapple holding him. He picks up Stone Kima and runs towards the rope to start climbing out of there. Vex casts Hunter's Mark on the Elder Brain and shoots a hail of thorns at it before climbing onto Trinket's back. Keyleth sinks into the stone floor again to move beneath the Elder Brain and punch up through it, then starts to move, well, she basically punches it, she doesn't really go through it. Then she starts to move toward the top where everyone is convening. Tiberius casts Fly on himself, Grog, and Trinket. Percy holds his turn. Pike finally shrugs off the effect of the Mind Blast stun, casts Cure Wounds on herself. I think she was at 6 hit points at the time, and gives Scanlan a kiss on the cheek for saving her from the melee. Vax stabs the Elder Brain some more, then jumps onto the magic carpet with Percy and kisses him on the cheek as well. It's so funny, later in the campaign when he's talking about the twins, I forget when he has this moment with Vax, and I was like, oh yes, this is the moment. Percy uses his turn to move the carpet straight up and takes a shot at the Elder Brain. The Elder Brain then blasts out a wave of energy, just missing them on the carpet. Grog drinks a superior healing potion as he flies up the rope with Kima in tow. A troll finally breaks through one of the collapsed doors while 2 more mind flayers fly up to mind blast Scanlan and Pike. Scanlan succeeds on his roll, but Pike fails, taking damage and bringing her down to 1 hit point. Scanlan casts Bigby's hand and tries to throw the metal contraption onto the Elder Brain successfully. It causes the two mind flayers who are floating up toward them to redirect and move toward the Elder Brain instead. Scanlan also pours a superior healing potion into Pike. Vex casts Conjure Barrage on the Elder Brain, one of the Intellect Devourers and the Troll, and then shoots another arrow at the Elder Brain. Keyleth continues her movement to get to the top of the temple, drops her Earth Elemental form, and then casts Control Water to try to latch onto the Elder Brain and rip it apart. It's not as successful as she wants, but she is able to damage it a little bit. Tiberius tells the group to head toward the beach, and then he throws a fireball at the Elder Brain. Vax throws some daggers at the Elder Brain, but is unable to hurt it, then flies the magic carpet to the top of the temple. Percy pulls out Bad News to shoot at the Elder Brain. Scanlan polymorphs into a pterodactyl and picks up Pike to start flying away. Grog starts flying away with Kima, but two mind flayers do get close enough to mind blast Vex and Trinket, who both fail their saves. So, in kind of a genius move, Keyleth jumps onto the carpet and casts Grasping Vine to wrap around Trinket to tow him and Vex behind the carpet, since he is technically flying still, just stunned. Tiberius continues to fly to the beach while Vax flies the carpet away from the temple at full speed. They manage to get away just in time for the mind flayers to swarm the top of the temple. As soon as Tiberius lands on the beach, he immediately begins casting Circle of Teleportation, which connects to Amon. Everyone else quickly follows him through the portal and enter a small, unfamiliar room. They discuss whether or not to restore Kima to flesh and decide to not. And they decide to put the horn into the bag of holding. Vax checks the door and finds out that it is locked but not trapped, so he unlocks it and stealths out. In the center of the room, he sees a glowing chandelier and a semicircle desk where an elven man is sitting reading books. There is a slight ringing sound, and Vax greets the man, who is alarmed, very alarmed at their presence. He demands that they identify themselves, and Vax attempts to explain, telling him to tell the Emperor that Vox Machina have returned from Craghammer. Vex winks and rolls high on her charisma check, so he identifies himself as Gatekeeper Xanthus. Percy names drops his ridiculously long name and asks to see the Emperor immediately, but he denies the request since it's really the middle of the night, and asks them to instead submit a report, which they agree to. He then shows them out, and after they exit, Keyleth falls to her knees and starts kissing the ground and pointing out the starry sky that they haven't seen since heading into the Underdark. So they decide to pub crawl their way across town to go back to their keep and weekend at Bernie's Kima's stone body along the way. I also made that a verb because why not? And that's where they break for the episode. So what do we think of this first half?
Okay, Clarota, because
Clarota.
I mean, they were all so surprised except for Travis, who was like, all of my notes for every week have been don't trust Clarota. And I'm like, Travis is the only sensible one here. Which honestly, yeah, that kind of keeps going sometimes. But come on, why are we trusting a mind flayer ever? Especially when he's telling you to wait until he can talk to the rest of the mind flayers. Like, this was just, I don't understand the logic, and I have lots of problems with this and opinions about it, I guess, as evidenced by the fact that I started off with the rant.
I mean, we have to start there. My favorite part was Marisha's face, because he's being accepted by his fellow mind flayers. They're welcoming him back in, and she has this like, oh, look, it's so cute. Look at them like re-entering him into society. And then the minute they turn around, her face goes, like, you can just see the realization wash over her, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know. They all have that kind of moment of, oh, wait, maybe this isn't a good thing. Like, they're so optimistic about what they're trying to do that they don't realize the implications it has for them. And that just, it baffles me, but also I have to remember that they're still fairly early level and they haven't quite gotten to the whole suspicious D&D player level at this point, even though that might be the lens that I'm viewing it with. Never would have gotten this far with Mind Flayer. This is just dumb.
I mean, I think it really is unique to the group of players as well. Like, for example, I'm running a D&D group right now that is full of first-time players. Like, they have no idea how D&D even works, and they are so suspicious of everything.
That will serve them well. Be suspicious of everything.
It will, but I find it super hilarious because they're like, this brick. Is this brick going to kill me?
I mean, yeah. I guess now that you pointed out, I'm in a campaign full of experienced players who are trying to make friends with everything. And I'm the suspicious one. So maybe it's me. But I don't know. It drives me crazy every time I restart this campaign that they are so surprised because it shouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah.
You can see it coming from a mile away.
Yeah. And I think it contributes to this whole theme that we've been talking about for a while now in terms of this change from casual D&D playing to like professional D&D playing that them as players are evolving through, because I don't think they took it as seriously when it was a home game.
Right.
And so I think they may have gotten a little, for lack of a better word, lax around the suspicion element because it was all fun and games prior to the stream. But now that they're on their stream, I think not only is Matt upping the serious level, but also their commitment to the game is also increasing over time. And I'm wondering.
Well, and I can see a lot of that coming from being able to play weekly instead of every couple months.
Yeah.
Because then it's more of we can consistently tell a story. We're not going to have to rehash what we did last time for 2 hours every time we meet up.
Yeah.
They can be more consistent and they can actually focus on a story instead of having to like ease their way in every time to the point where they get stuff done but not at the same rate and not with the same seriousness because they just can't maintain that.
Totally. It's a lot less monster of the week, because this time I wonder if it's the first time that group has had an NPC join them for that length of time.
It's a good question. I don't know,
because we don't know what happened before stream, but that changes things because proximity and length of time that you spend with someone typically does build trust over time. And so I wonder if they're just learning that lesson.
I mean, maybe, but also they trusted him immediately, much to my chagrin.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if Matt played into that because they weren't suspicious, it became a betrayal. Because that would be a better story than, I think it makes a better story for Clarota to respond opposite of whatever they expected him to. That as soon as they trusted him, pronouns are getting the better of me today. That's when he became, someone who would betray them. Whereas if they had distrusted him, then Matt would have made him friendly and kind of played against those expectations.
Yeah, because we don't know what's going on in Matt's head with all of this either, because this is also pre-Vox Machina.
Right. I don't know. I think that, we're starting to see Matt's storytelling really play out and how he plays characters off of each other on purpose. So as much as Clarota irks me, and Clarota irks me every time, I think Matt uses him well to tell a story and to start showing us what his story is.
Yeah, I mean, like, even from the very beginning, I think it's a great testament to Matt's skill as a DM to even have Clarota be in that cave in the first place, like where they found him, because typically in a D&D campaign, you would expect some sort of treasure to loot in a cave like that. That's usually the go-to to like place a chest, and he does that throughout the campaign, is like, here's this weird hole in the wall that you can go explore and you might find a few magical items kind of thing as a DM. But he specifically put a creature down there, not only a creature that they had who has a one set purpose, but a creature that has an open-ended story. Like he, from the very beginning, made it clear that he was rejected from his family of mind flayers. And that in itself also plays into the group's traumas.
That's fair, yeah.
So I wonder how intentional Matt was with that choice of backstory for that particular creature that he chose to place in the map.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if it was incredibly intentional. Matt likes to play off of their experiences as people, but also, you know, not just their character backstories, but things that are meaningful to them away from the table. And he talks about that later with some of the stuff that Liam gets in this game, and why that came about because of real life factors. So it would make sense for it to start early. Like he builds this game around them, you know, and not just what they've given him to work with, but what he knows is going on as their friend. And I think that's part of what makes it so special.
Yeah, and I think a great parallel to that, complement to that, example of that is Grog and his red buttons. Like Matt intentionally places so many red buttons.
And it's good for everybody because Grog gets to press buttons, everybody else gets a story, and Matt gets to, you know, have red buttons in his campaign.
Cackle maniacally in the background. Yeah. I think that's a testament to his master of the craft and his experience in the D&D world and running campaigns, because even lately with the current campaign, he's made some comments around how he's had groups over the years always talk about wanting to return to old characters, like run into them in real life as a new character and have that dynamic. And he's never had that chance because he's never had a series of campaigns with the same group of people, except for now. And it's giving Matt such creative license to really deepen the experience for the players in unique ways, because not every DM can do that.
Yeah, and that is a slippery slope.
It is.
Like, as soon as you open up the door of, hey, here's these legendary characters that you played last campaign or, you know, 2 campaigns ago, and they're here and you have access to them, that becomes something that you have to then balance to the point where those legends don't take over the story again, where you're still telling a new story. And so Matt's got a huge job ahead of him by bringing those characters back in. But I think starting at the beginning of campaign 1, we see him start prepping to become the DM that can handle that.
Yeah.
There's not many DMs I would trust to bring in characters like Vox Machina in a later campaign.
Totally. Yeah. And I love that they're able to collectively grow together. And I think that's what makes the series so engaging for audiences as well, is because it doesn't become rote at any point in time. There's always new complexities introduced. There's always new dynamics introduced. There's new mechanics introduced along the way, new settings, like all kinds of stuff that I think makes it such an enduring piece of media for the audience.
Yeah, and they're working off a formula, but it doesn't ever feel formulaic. And I think that's a testament to the effort they put into creating different characters, to creating different stories, and why they can return to them in the way that they do. because they do feel so incredibly different that you're not going to mix them up with whatever characters they have going on now. And I think that's an important part of making that work.
And I think the improv element also really contributes to that, because we've talked about this before, is that it's not planned out. These are raw, imperfect emotions and reactions that we're getting here from both the players and the characters. And I think that also makes it highly relatable, like highly relatable to characters and audience alike.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
Do we want to talk about Tiberius at all?
It's kind of avoiding him. You know, the thing about this episode is this is the episode where they start talking back to him. Where they start, they've tried doing subtly communicating that they're not really okay with what he's doing. This is the episode where they start calling him out and they start actively responding to him. And so as much as I hate watching him, it's a good lesson in how to deal with a problem player. You're seeing it play out at the table and the stages that it needs to go through. And they've reached that, next stage of actively saying, hey, this isn't okay.
Yeah, totally. And I appreciate Sam's always the instigator, like in every shape or form. He's usually the instigator, especially when it comes to being critical about something. He's the instigator. And I think it's really telling is like once the other players start pushing back as well, it's really telling how Orion's responses to them pushing back play out. Like I wrote down this one exchange that they had where Marisha went, that's why we're all burnt out on spells, like because they fought the beholder before this. Orion says, except me. And Laura goes, because I didn't help you guys.
Yeah.
And everyone laughed, including Orion. He was like, I didn't, did I?
Yeah, he's like, they put him in a bit of an awkward situation and he deserves it.
But he's not even recognizing it.
Right. I also really liked like Liam's, you don't need a guitar solo every turn. They're trying to do it in ways that are joking and funny and not make it awkward because they know they're in a public forum. But they're also being very clear of this is what you're doing and this is my problem. They're making it jokes, they're making it part of the game, and they're trying to keep it cordial and fun, but they're also being very clear about it.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite parts too was Sam reacting to the unexpected amount of damage that he did with his fireball spell. Like I think it was like 40 or something, but it was
high. Yeah,
it was high, especially for it's like what, 66 for a fireball?
I think so.
And I think something the average of that is like what, 6 times 4 is 24.
Yeah.
Or 6 times 3, actually, it would be. So that would be 18 is like the average for that.
Right.
So 40 is extraordinarily high. And like Sam's
40 is
about it.
Basically all 6s and a bonus.
Yeah.
It's hard to get.
Yeah. And Sam's questioning about it, and Orion made it sound like it was some feature that he had that he could like double his damage for some reason. And Sam was like, wow, I wish I had that. He made a comment of like, I've been playing it all wrong. Why didn't I choose that? And it's a way to like point out the behavior without being like aggressively confrontational about it. It's like just flagging it and being like, let's just flag this for future consideration.
And that they're having some conversations behind the scenes because they're very aware that this is a public platform and they have been since the beginning. So this isn't all there is to the conversation because it can't be.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that they communicate as a table. They always have, they always will. It's one of their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that we don't see as an audience.
Yeah.
You know, there are some tables that will show you, you know, their lines and veils, and they'll have that conversation about safety tools in D&D. And Critical Role isn't really one of those tables. We know they have them. They've talked about it in panels, they've talked about it offline, and we know that they've existed from the beginning. It's something that Matt has talked about before, but they're not showing it all to us.
Mm-hmm.
The parts that they are showing to us, this confrontation, makes it even more important that we see it, because that means that it's gone past the point where they can contain it in a way that doesn't interrupt the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's our cue of how serious this is to them and how far it's actually gone.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said before, I think it's a great example of how to deal with conflict in a group scenario and problematic team players in a group scenario, which begs the next question is like, what kind of personal experiences are coming to mind for us in this?
I mean, both with what's going on with Tiberius and with what went on in Clarota, it's that sometimes people just aren't good for you. You know, you can try all you want to be friends with a person, and sometimes it's just not good for either party. You know, I've had people that I have loved hanging out with, but for some reason or another, it just wasn't healthy to continue that relationship. And I guess it's coming to mind because some of this is very recent of, you know, having that kind of relationship where it got to a point where it was messing with my job, messing with my other friendships, messing with my ability to maintain a sleep schedule and function on a day-to-day basis. And having to step back and say, you know, this isn't really okay and I need to move on. And to recognize that, you know, I might want to be your friend. I might want to be in this kind of a situation, but I can't be. And it's for my own good. And it's because you're hurting me and maybe not intentionally. But it's time to move on. And I think that that's coming through in a couple ways. And it's not the most comfortable realization to make as a, you know, personal connection to these episodes, but it is something that I see reflected here. That is important to recognize in real life, I guess.
I mean, it is. And like what's also coming to mind for me is like actions speak louder than words too. Because now that I think back in terms of like Clarota's actions, he was never really highly engaged in the fights that they were having. He often took a back seat in the conflicts that they got into along the way. I don't know if he had any killing blows on any of the fights that they had. Like he didn't really take that big of a lead in any of the fights. And even was on the whole anti-Kima team thing going on and often offered to suck people's brains out for them.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit of a red flag there.
Which, you know, mind players do what mind players do, but I mean, there's a lot of examples when it comes to Tiberius and Orion, when it comes to actions being louder than words for this scenario. But it just reminds me that no matter what people say to your face or how they try to explain things away to you, you really need to pay attention to what actions they're actually taking in the process. Like, even as simple as how they treat servers. That's something that I've been noticing a lot lately. Like, how do they treat service people, bellhops or waiters, or even just like train conductors for like bus drivers? Like, how do they treat these more invisible servants of the public? Like, do they treat them as a non-entity? Do they treat them as a human? How does that reaction or interaction go? Because I think that's so telling of how they treat people that they don't like or people that they don't think is worth are worth their respect.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think my big measure for people a lot of the time is how do they respond to people who are going to trade school instead of college or going into
Totally.
blue collar positions, because it's the same idea, those people in society who are providing incredibly valuable services and should be just as celebrated as everybody else, but there's this stigma for whatever reason, and not going to get into that because I could start off on a whole nother rant.
That's okay.
But it's the same idea, people who are in service models, who are, working blue collar or who are working, in hospitality, deserve the same respect. And seeing how somebody treats people in those positions is a huge indicator of who they are as a person.
Yeah, I mean, even saw that with COVID and the pandemic and like retail workers, grocery store workers, and how much they were vilified just for enforcing the rules that were handed down to them for some reason or another. And I think it's just a perfect example of action speaking louder than words. And I don't know if the group has learned that yet.
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress. I think it's a work in progress for everybody. If you're clapping for healthcare workers and then won't wear a mask, that might say something about you. I have opinions. I've cut myself off.
I've gotten the algorithm of TikTok has caught me in the Karen exposure video black hole. Because it's so like looking over the fence and being like, oh, she did not say that. Oh, that she did not. It's bad.
Yeah. I haven't fallen down the hole of TikTok yet. I'm actively avoiding it.
Yeah,
Don't want to deal with another
Instagram
algorithm.
too. The whole Karen exposure video trend is a thing on all of the platforms.
The only social media I am actually active on is Tumblr because there's no algorithm.
Oh, the sweet, sweet land of Tumblr.
Everything else is just anxiety inducing to the point where it's just not fun. So
yeah. I tell people that Tumblr is my safe space, and people, if they understand, they understand. If they don't, they have no idea what I'm talking about.
If they don't, maybe they're better suited to a different sort of social media, and that's fine.
Totally. All right. Well, what are we going to do as a result?
I think for me, the biggest thing I want to take away is that you can't save somebody who doesn't want to be saved. And that there's a safety in protecting yourself. So if somebody doesn't want to be saved, you got to let them do what they want to do and you got to walk away. And I think that that's really hard to remember. And saved is a big word, but this applies to just about anything. If somebody doesn't want to, wear a mask or get a flu vaccine or whatever little itty bitty inconsequential thing that they don't want to do, sometimes your job is just to walk away and protect yourself.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually had a conversation today on a networking Zoom call of like how much I've jumped on the train of just let it go. Like, especially when I get into conflicts with people nowadays, I have to have this conversation with myself of being like, all right, is this worth the emotional effort to continue down this road of having a conflict with them in order to show them the light of their imperfections that are coming up to the surface in this interaction that we're having? And I really embraced this like let it go philosophy in terms of like, I'm just going to give them back to the universe because karma is a thing.
Yeah. I mean, throughout this podcast, we've learned that I have very strong opinions about things. Like, this is not a secret. But learning to kind of let that go and walk away for my own safety is something that I am figuring out how to do. It's not something I'm good at, but I'm working on it. And I think that this is kind of the episode where that really comes to light, where as a thing that I can pull from it and say, yeah, it would have made sense. It would have been better for everybody. And oh, maybe I should listen to that.
Yeah, totally. And like for me, I'm thinking a lot about the silence and the action thing, because I actually read a book recently where the main character is cursed to be silent for the length of it, what it takes her to complete the task that she's given because of the curse. And so she can't tell anyone about what's happening with the curse. She can't tell anyone like what she's trying to do to fix the curse. So she's basically turned mute for the time frame. And it was just really fascinating to watch or read about all of these different people's reactions to her lack of language, because she was no longer able to be persuaded. She was no longer able to be gaslit.
Interesting.
She was no longer able to be razzle dazzled because she couldn't engage in it. And I just thought that was super fascinating. I'm like, man, the different responses that you get when you refuse to engage with that type of behavior, which I think we're also talking about in terms of letting go and like letting it into the universe, is like, you do have the opportunity yourself to be like, I'm just not going to even engage with this behavior. Like even talking about the Karen videos, like how would a Karen react if you just don't react to her at all?
Yeah.
And it's just really fascinating. It's like, I can choose, like, it's kind of how they say no is a complete sentence. Like, you don't even have to answer in the first place.
Right. Yeah, I think similar takeaways in different ways. Just different actions to be taken, but the same lesson, and I like that. But yeah, I think that we've both taken something very important from this episode, and that's, leave it alone, walk away, and let actions determine what you do next instead of promises.
Yeah, and speak for themselves too. Let actions speak for themselves. And because I've often found, and I think this holds true in this particular episode with the Tiberius and the Chlorotus stuff, is they will dig their own holes if you just
That's
let
fair.
them.
Yeah. People do tend to do that, yeah.
If left on their own, they will just dig themselves further deeper without any help from you.
Yeah, it's a good point.
All right, well, anything we want to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I'm gonna leave the ranting alone for today.
There's plenty of episodes for more ranting.
I'm sure I'll find a way to get them in there somehow.
Yeah. And it's always powerful stuff that we're walking away with in these episodes. And I think that's the point of the sacred reading practices, of being like, all right, what's going on below the surface, both for the story and ourselves absorbing the story that we're experiencing. And that's what I love about these questions, is that it just takes it incrementally deeper with each episode.
I would agree.
So please join in your own insights and stories and comments and thoughts and feelings and flaws, because we're talking a lot about our flaws on this series. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, it's good. Reflection is good.
Oh, right. So special thanks to Alyssa for joining me on this episode as well. It's been an absolute pleasure, per usual.
Yeah, I'm always glad to be here.
Yeah, the next time we'll be discussing episode 12, part 2, and I think it'll be a short one because I don't think the second half is that long.
I think it's like 45 minutes or something like that.
Yeah. So Alyssa will be back. We're super excited to dive into it as well. And as always, I'm looking for more co-hosts and guests. If you're interested in coming on the series, just hit me up. I'll send you the sign-up link, easy peasy. And in the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe, follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and always, always, always remember to love each other. Take care, guys.
Bye.